Hello, everybody. Welcome to All Villa, No Filler. Please remember to like and subscribe. Subscribe if you love the mighty Villa and you can't help but laugh at Birmingham City being down there in League One. Um, Look, the rules are if you don't subscribe, apparently you're a Blues fan. I didn't write those rules, someone else did. Don't ask me who. I just heard a rumour. Anyway, here we are, Aston Villa. They've just lost 2-0 to Arsenal. Sorry to remind you of that, but we are looking now to bounce back. The Villa's fixtures are what you would call a little bit nicer than the opening two fixtures. West Ham away and Arsenal at home. Difficult opening to the season and did very well to get the 3 points away at West Ham. And then Arsenal at home. I think if Ollie Watkins had taken either one of them chances, Villa could very well have come away as winners and beaten Arsenal 3 times in a row. Shame we didn't do it, but I thought it was a tactical masterclass from Unai Emery. Kind of went exactly sort of as I sort of talked about here on this podcast last week in the Arsenal preview, in that the inverted fullback. It wasn't Zinchenko, it was Jurriën Timber, as a few Arsenal fans had told me was likely to happen. He was the one who came into the centre, and the right hand side was where Arsenal has always seemed to be at their most threatening. And Odegaard Island, as I described it, Aston Villa did a fantastic job in keeping that keeping it cut off. They were like John McGinn was like a ship going around the island, just keeping that island away. It can't communicate with the outside world. But unfortunately, when John McGinn came off, his positioning was really good, so the pass wasn't ever really on into Odegaard, particularly in the first sort of 65 minutes. But there was just that spell leading up to Trossard's goal, or the first goal, that I think when McGinn came off, where Ramsey came on and there were one or two little spaces that opened up, and it was Odegaard making that pass, as we talked about, into Bukayo Saka, getting in behind, and he pulls it back, and then, as luck would have it, bounces off Morgan Rogers straight into the path of Trossard. So I think Villa did a great job. I think we did everything we could do, obviously, apart from conceding the goals. But I think if Villa had taken the two chances that came, the first chance coming from a fantastic press from Villa, Leon Bailey getting onto Gabriel, Villa could easily have won it. Something else worth noting as well with that inverted fullback was that when Jurriën Timber came inside, what was interesting to me, and I kind of wish I'd been in the stadium to see this. I wish I'd been in the stadium to see what Villa's build-up play was like, because things are going to adjust this season. Football is always about evolution. You don't stand still. Alex Ferguson never stood still. Pep Guardiola's never stood still. Unai Emery will not stand still, because obviously other teams get used to how you play. They have a game plan for it and eventually work you out. So you have to just keep on evolving. That's partly signing new players, but it's also adjusting how you build up, how you defend, all these kind of things. So yeah, I think with Villa, what was interesting was that when we pressed Arsenal, Leon Bailey would kind of be in the front two with Ollie Watkins at times, and Morgan Rogers would sit behind the two of them, sort of central to them, and be a little bit deeper. And what I think was doing, I would love to talk to Professor Unai about this. My God, how I would bore the life out of that man. I bore the life out of you watching this and listening to it. Believe me, I would bore the life out of that guy, asking him question after question after question. But I think with Rodgers just sitting a little bit deeper, it meant that the inverted fullback would come inside, and what was happening was it was crowded. It wasn't really anywhere for him to go. It became kind of ineffective, really. And I wonder, considering inverted fullbacks are now the in vogue thing, Liverpool have been doing it with Trent. Arsenal obviously were doing it with Zinchenko, Timber at the weekend, and I think they'll do it with Calafiori. Man City do it, but they tend to usually have a centre back who comes forward in John Stones. So I wonder if what Unai Emery's done is a sort of template for how to deal with inverted fullbacks. We shall see. We shall see as the season develops, and whether other teams try and emulate it, whether Villa ourselves try to do it the next time we have to play a team that attempts it. But next game is Leicester City, and that's who we're here to talk about. Interesting game, actually. I think there's a temptation to look at that and think you look at their squad and you think, come on, Villa should be winning that. And Villa are pound for pound the stronger team. But Steve Cooper is a very canny manager who has caused us many a problem before. We've played Cooper 3 times. Once under Stevie G, where we drew 1-1, and Ashley Young had a moment of magic, scoring a goal from a million miles away. But Villa were rubbish in that game. We were rubbish. It was at the City Ground. Somehow came away with a 1-1 draw. It's surprised when I say that Aston Villa under Steven Gerrard were rubbish. Let me reiterate the point. We were rubbish under him. But then Steve Cooper has played against Unai Emery's Aston Villa twice before, again at Nottingham Forest, where we won 2-0. And that game came in April of 2023. Now, if you remember, that was during the time when Aston Villa were on an absolutely unbelievable run of form. It meant when we beat Forest in that game, it meant that we went 4 games successively won. I think it was just after we'd beaten Leicester 2-1 with that Traore goal. But what I remember specifically about that game, was that Nottingham Forest packed the centre of the pitch, right? And didn't really press us that much. And Villa looked a little bit sixes and sevens, bearing in mind that Aston Villa was so good in that spell, in the run to Europe, driven by the signing of Alex Moreno and Jacob Ramsey coming alive, Ollie Watkins scoring goal after goal after goal. In that run, Nottingham Forest were definitely one of the tougher games at Villa Park as well. Because, again, you go into it high in confidence, you think it's going to be quite easy. It was we only scored our first goal quite some way into the second half. Couldn't score in the first half, couldn't really create any opportunities because Forest smartly packed up the centre of the pitch. Just made it difficult for Villa to play through them. And there were 1 or 2 occasions where Forest tried to beat the high line, but were constantly caught offside through a one-year. Again, how do I remember this stuff? So what's going on in my brain? Why do I remember this stuff? But then in the second half, Tricky Traore, as we call him, Bertie Traore, he scored a great reaction goal. It came from the ball coming to him, knocks it inside, and then what the hell John Joe Shelby was doing, passes it straight back to Traore, bangs it in the bottom corner. So that came from a Forest mistake. Villa worked the opportunity, good. But, Forest would think they should have defended that better. And then we didn't score again until last minute of the game, well into injury time. It was a great goal. Again, Traore down the left, gets it inside, comes all the way to Watkins, passes it to Ramsey. Ramsey holds it, pulls it back. Watkins takes it past the defender and chips the keeper to continue his red-hot goal-scoring form. But Steve Cooper then beat us 2-0 last season. I think it was in November of last year. And if you remember correctly, Aston Villa were on a great run of form. We'd not really done anything wrong since the opening 3 games of the season when we lost 5-1 at Newcastle and 3-0 at Liverpool. After that, Villa were brilliant. Didn't really lose a game. But then we went to the City Ground. And this is what I remember happening. Nottingham Forest went into that game with the crowd behind them, right? They knew the crowd was going to be loud, proud. And in that first 20 minutes, what was tending to happen with Villa a little bit, at least in the first half of last season, I remember, even when we were in great form, is that sometimes Villa in those opening 20 minutes were a bit slow to get going. And sometimes the opposition teams, they just went at us in the first 20 and got an early goal and then sat in deep. That could create problems for Aston Villa. And that is exactly what Nottingham Forest did. They got in down the left. I think it was through Toffolo, pulled it back to the edge of the area, which looked like something from the training ground. It was something that with Steve Cooper, it felt like he'd spotted. The Villa would get their defenders maybe into the centre and actually just leave the space in the centre, just off outside the area. And that's where Aina ran into. brilliant finish, great finish. XG probably wasn't very high on it, but they got the goal they needed. They used that momentum of the crowd, and once they got that early goal, they then just sat in deep and went to a 4-5-1. And Villa passed it around and passed it around and passed it around. More than 70% possession, didn't really create a chance. Nothing really particularly to write home about. Zaniolo had one decentish chance, but not a great one. And then in the second half, there was a great ball into Ollie Watkins, who went for the header, but mistimed his header, and nothing came of it. And the problem was, Forest sat in deep. We couldn't really do anything. They bunged up the middle of the pitch again, like Steve Cooper does to Villa. And then second half, same thing happened again. Crowd up for it. They get ball down the left. I think it was Elanga who was causing a lot of problems on that day, and I'll come back to Elanga. Pulls it back, I think, to I can't remember the player it was now. Murillo, maybe? Whoever it was, they took a shot from a long way out. Emi Martinez, with a very rare mistake, don't know what he was doing, palms it into his own net, 2-0. And from there, again, Nottingham Forest sitting deep. They have the crowd behind them, and Villa pass and pass and pass. Can't get anything from it. But the reason I mention Elanga there and why it's interesting is because I think it might relate to potentially what Leicester might try and do to Aston Villa this weekend. Now, if you remember last season, there were some teams who sat deep against Villa and tried to hit us on the break, and we had problems dealing with it. Zielinski Mostar at Villa Park sat in deep, and we couldn't score a goal against them until the 95th bloody minute through John McGinn. Nottingham Forest repeated the trick. Couldn't get a goal against them all game. And they got the goal exactly when they needed to, and it just meant they could fall into that defensive 4-5-1 shape that they wanted to do. And then keep trying to catch us out at the high line over and over again. Sheffield United at home last season, 0-0 until about the 87th minute. Then Cameron Archer scores against us, and we fortunately got a late equaliser in the 97th minute through Zaniolo. So a few teams showed last season that if you can sit in deep and work a chance against Villa that you take, you can make life really, really hard for Emery's Villa. Now, I think one way to address that was potentially getting someone like a Joao Felix, as Sam Tai calls it, the lock picker. Maybe Buendia is at this season, and I wonder if we're going to see Buendia this weekend against Leicester at some point. But we still don't really have an out-and-out profile player like that. And if Leicester choose to sit in deep against us again, I do wonder how Villa are going to cope with that. But one element that is different to last season, when you think back to all of those 0-0 draws, or all those draws, or the losses, when we struggled to break down deep line defence, we didn't have a really, really proactive fullback. Matty Cash isn't great at beating a man in the final third. He simply isn't good at it. And he tends to cut back, pass inside, doesn't like going one-on-one with a player. Every now and again, he gets past and he pulls the ball back into the area. But by and large, he's not a defender who likes, a fullback who likes to take a man on. Lucas Digne, again, is a defender who doesn't really get into the final third all that often. And when he does, it tends to just be a whipped ball into the centre, across. Alex Moreno is a bit more of a dynamic fullback. And you saw in the season before, in that half season where Villa were brilliant, his dynamism down the left really helped. And I think that with Ian Maatsen, that is an element that might be very, very useful against a deep lying defense. A fullback who's a little bit more proactive. Now, we're going to go. That's enough for me talking down the camera. For those on YouTube, we are going to our old friend, the Tactical Pads. And for those listening on Spotify, Apple, wherever, I'll make this as listenable as possible, as I always do. I think, before I get into it, look, very close to 100 reviews now on Spotify. So if you can do that, a 5-star review helps us massively, helps us keep on growing. So if you like what we do, that phone app, Spotify, 5 stars is massive for us. I see more people have been writing reviews on Apple iTunes as well and giving us nice 5-star reviews on there. As I say, those things help so much. And I have to keep reiterating this just because if I don't say it, it doesn't get done, does it? So thank you so much to everyone who's done it for us. And can't thank you enough. And for everyone who comments down below as well and comments on Spotify and wherever, I really, really appreciate it and love interacting with everybody. But anyway, back to the game at hand. So I've got the tactical pad up here, and I've got the same Aston Villa team up as we saw against Arsenal. And I've got the Leicester team up that played against Tottenham, and I think also had the same starting lineup against Fulham at the weekend, where they lost 2-1, although the formation was a bit different to what they played against Tottenham. They played a 4-2-3-1 against Tottenham, and I think it was a 3-4-3 they played at Fulham. Now, so as you can see, for those looking, I've got the same lineup as we had against Arsenal, but I've got Ian Maatsen beside Lucas Digne, and I've got Kostas Nedeljkovic beside Matty Cash. Matty Cash is injured, he's out. Nedeljkovic is going to play, most likely, unless Professor Unai decides to bring in Diego Carlos as centre back and stick Conte out onto the right, or, noise levels are rising about Lutschel Hotroida from Feyenoord. We've talked about him plenty on this podcast. I've done plenty of interviews. Please go check that out. He was on our scouting series. Amazingly, we scouted him. So, Monchi, thanks for listening, and thanks. Please give us a 5-star review, Monchi. But we then talked to Joe Baker, a Dutch football journalist, who gave us a great lowdown on him. If he turns up, fantastic. He can play centre back and he can play right back, and he's a progressive player as well. He can also go into midfield. That versatility thing that Professor Unai likes. But look, Kostas Nedeljkovic, I think he did a very, very good job against Martinelli. He grew in confidence in the game. I think Trossard was a little bit more of a lesson for him in that Trossard, his movement was a little bit more evasive than what Martinelli is. Martinelli is a little bit more direct. Nedeljkovic is very, very young, and I thought it was a very impressive showing for a player of his age. Obviously, has a lot to learn. I think from what I've seen, from the raw ingredients he has, I really believe in the guy and believe he has a high ceiling. And I think we just have to be patient with the fact he's young. So there might be some mistakes coming at some point. But look, if he is the one who plays this weekend, he's the one who plays this weekend, and he'll be going up most likely against Bobby De Cordova-Reid, who Leicester signed from Fulham in the summer. And I'm going to gamble here and say I think that Ian Maatsen makes his full Premier League starting debut for the mighty Villa. Now, this is the first game this season where Villa are expected to be the more ascendant team against Arsenal and West Ham. Arsenal, we have to be more canny. We have to accept that they probably are the favourites, even though we beat them twice in a row last season. They're the team that's most likely to go for the Premier League title this season. But so Villa have to have a bit more of a game plan where we try and nullify their great threats. West Ham away, again, it's not a game where you fully expect Villa to be the ascendant team all the time. It's a game where you expect him some ebb and flow, where West Ham kind of have to take it to a little bit more because they're at home. Leicester away, Villa are playing against a team that's just got promoted. We have to look at it and think, we are going to be the more proactive team in this game, and are expected to be. And if we got more than 70% possession against quite a good Nottingham Forest team, good players under Steve Cooper, then you have to expect that Villa might have something similar at Leicester. Now, the area that does interest me a bit is where Fatawu and Ian Maatsen are. Now, if you go with Maatsen, what you can expect in this game is that he's going to get forward a fair bit, right? Like I say, I'm quite interested to know how Villa's build-up play is going this season. I think I sense the subtle adjustments, and I'll be very, very interested to watch that in person. But as you can see, with Ian Maatsen going forward, it also leaves space in behind. And that was something Nottingham Forest under Steve Cooper did pay close attention to last season. And what was happening there was that Lucas Digne wasn't really the more proactive fullback. It was actually Matty Cash who was going forward in that game. And what was happening a lot was that Elanga was getting in where that space was in behind and charging down the left and getting balls in. And this time, if Ian Maatsen goes forward, and let's imagine a Harry Winks or an Ndidi or Oliver Skip, if he plays, whoever wins the ball back, you can imagine a world in which Abdul Fatawu, they hit that ball into him very quickly when Maatsen's caught a little bit further up the pitch. Now, Fatawu, to me, is a very, very interesting player indeed. I watched Leicester versus Tottenham, and in that first hour, I have absolutely no earthly idea whatsoever how Tottenham were not 27-0 ahead. They made it look like Leicester simply did not belong in the Premier League. And I have never, ever in my life thought more rapidly, oh my God, we're watching a team get relegated on the first day of the season. But Tottenham did not take enough of their chances. They took one in the first half through Pedro Porro, got a good goal, whipped into the area, and it came from the left-hand side. And it was down the left-hand side where Tottenham were incredibly dangerous. You had James Maddison moving around. I'll use John McGinn as the character here, moving around at will. You had Udoji moving forward all the time into the final third. You had Son Heung-min moving around in conjunction with James Maddison. That left-hand side just made life an absolute bloody nightmare for Leicester. However, Leicester showed incredible resilience. Tottenham, for all their possession and a couple of chances, the chances weren't, totally gilt-edged. I'd say Zielinski probably thinks he should have got at least one, but it wasn't like, absolutely easy chances all the way through. And Leicester just, they stuck in the game, they kept going, and eventually Christiansen got all the way into the final third. He knocks the ball across, and who does it come to? It misses everybody, but it comes to Fatawu out on the left, who'd found a bit of space. And Fatawu whips the ball into the back post, and Jamie Vardy scores a header. That man, Jamie Vardy. Now, Fatawu is interesting because if you look at his stats from last season in the Championship, he's only 20 years of age. He played 40 games in the Championship last season as a teenager for Leicester. He scored 6 goals and he got 13 assists. And if you look at his FBref stats, something that caught my eye a little bit was his progressive carries, better than 89% of other attacking mids and wingers. His successful take-ons is better than 93% of other wingers. And again, if you look at him defensively as well, he does a great job there. His interceptions are good, his tackles are good, blocks, clearances. Aerials one is very high number. The looks to me there, player is quite all-rounded. And the reason I brought him up is because I mentioned that Tottenham game. 2 players who really caught my eye in that game were Facundo Buonanotte and Abdul Fatawu. And I thought Fatawu, all game, even when Tottenham were at their most scary, quite frank, Fatawu always looked like a player who, when he got the ball, was going to do the right thing. A player who was looking to make things happen and who Tottenham didn't have great ease dealing with. So I talk about this area here so if Ian Maatsen is getting forward and he is the more proactive fullback, and if he starts, that is, who knows, maybe Professor puts Lucas Digne in and starts him again. Maybe he will. But I'm taking a bit of a punt and saying Maatsen might get his first start. And if he does, and he gets on forward a lot and operates in that area, pushing into the final third, getting the ball back and forth. Villa are just going to have to be very, very aware of Fatawu. I called it Odegaard Island last week. What would you call this? Fatawu in space. Fatawu floating in space. Fatawu up there as a moon of Jupiter floating around. The moon of Fatawu. Something like that. Out there in all that space. In the great eternal darkness of space. And if he can just find that space and get to a final third, put a ball in. He's already got one assist from a fantastic cross into Jamie Vardy. There's every reason to believe he could cause us a few problems as well in that respect. So I'm just bringing up a threat that Leicester can pose. Aston Villa, like, you look at us there and you think, in the centre, Tielemans and Onana will almost certainly start again as that pairing. And the two of them have been really good against West Ham and Arsenal and have the makings of a top partnership. And I can't help but think that they're going to have a lot of the ball going forward, and that Winks and Ndidi are going to have their work cut out trying to contain the two of them. And Buonanotte most likely will be made to come deeper and try and deal with, Tielemans on the ball or Onana. But the thing is, again, with Buonanotte, he's only 19, so they're relying on quite a bit of youth as well as experience in Vardy and Cordova-Reid. But Buonanotte as well against Leicester, him and Fatawi were the two players who caught my eye. I thought Buonanotte, again, he looked like what you would describe as a canny player, someone who works space. He sort of can get into, tight areas and retain the ball and find the pass, or he can find space and he'll pick out the right player. He tries to make things happen. He's a good link man between the midfield, say a Winks or Ndidi putting the ball into him, linking it to, Jamie Vardy. And there was one great move that Leicester made against Tottenham where Cordova-Reid came inside. Buonanotte linked up with, I think it was Winks. Buonanotte found space here. Jamie Vardy ran on through because Cordova-Reid had opened the space, of course, by coming inside. Jamie Vardy took that ball in from Buonanotte and should have scored. And, quite frankly, they could have beaten Tottenham against all the odds. So I just think Buonanotte, like I say, I think there's something about him that if Leicester are sitting deep and just trying to hit Villa on the break, Fatawu finding space is an area where they can cause problems. And Buonanotte just coming a bit deeper and finding the right pass over the top or a good through ball into a Vardy could cause Villa problems. The high line we play, Vardy is a very experienced striker. Does he have the pace to get in behind our defence anymore? Well, he won't have the pace that he used to, but he's still dangerous. And Cordova-Reid, of course, as well. Again, a very experienced Premier League player. He can make things happen. He was good against Fulham the other day. And Kostas Delikovic, he's a young and inexperienced player, and Steve Cooper will be quite aware of that. So, there are threats that Leicester can definitely pose. But with Villa, we've got to look at it and think Leon Bailey on Christiansen. That is an area of the pitch where you really have to think Bailey must fancy himself going one-on-one with it. Now, Christiansen is a sort of physical player, and as he showed against Tottenham, he can also get forward and put in some good balls. But it is a part of the pitch where you think Bailey, the kind of form he's in, one-on-one out there, that is somewhere where he can cause plenty of problems. And then, of course, Morgan Rogers, he hasn't scored yet in the 2 games this season. He's been, I think, outstanding in both games against West Ham and Arsenal. And I can't help but think that his goal is coming. And it could very well come this weekend. And when one comes, I think a lot will come. And I think the interesting thing about Leicester as well is that, if they sit deep, which I think they likely will, in a similar way to Forest this season, One other thing Villa do have, if teams try and defend deep, is that they have a player in Rodgers who could score from deep, score from well outside the area. He's shown it on multiple occasions, and if you think of the West Ham game where he burst through their midfield and got to the edge of the area and whipped one to the bottom corner that was saved by the West Ham keeper. Those are the kinds of goals that I think against the deep line defence might come in handy. You think back to last season as well against Chelsea, where he scored from outside the area, the goal against Brentford, again from the edge of the area. Morgan Rogers has shown he's more than capable of scoring goals like that. Ollie Watkins' goal has to come as well soon. John McGinn, I always think McGinn's just automatically going to be a starter because he's just what he is. He's intelligent. He's really good. But Villa just have the kind of players who can cause a multitude of problems again. And as we all know, Jacob Ramsey could come on for John McGinn and at some point in the game. And again, he's not going to have the space to run into, but Ramsey has shown he's a good link-up player as well. So he could link up well with Ian Maatsen, John Duran as well. We've got to come in if we want. And Ross Barkley would be an interesting one. I feel like Barkley might be good against a Leicester. Just again, he came on the other day against Arsenal, just working play from deep, trying to pick out passes, doing a good defensive job when players pressing from deep. I think that's, obviously where he's at. But you look at Villa squad and you think there's plenty there to cause Leicester problems. Just the question mark of how do we react now if we play against a deep line defense of a low block, as in football parlance now. We showed last season there were games where we really did struggle to break it down. And you do wonder, could this be a game for a Buendia? Could it be one where he comes in there and just, play, maybe comes in as the second striker and maybe they move Ramsey out into the left at some point? Or maybe Buendia himself goes into that left position and does a little bit what Maddison was doing for Tottenham against Leicester, where moves around a lot, works clever passes with Maatsen coming in behind, finds a ball, whips a ball into a Rodgers or a McGinn coming past, or sorry, what Rodgers or Watkins coming past a defender. I do think this would be a game where Buendia, it might be handy to see him come on and try and work some of his old magic, because he's going to have to play at some point this season, isn't he? And if we're struggling to break down Leicester, do we have that sort of lock picker player? Well, he's the closest profile to it. And I just wonder if a couple of little clever link-up plays between him and Maatsen, and maybe him and Rodgers or him and Ramsey, might be what actually leads to us breaking Leicester down. Now, something else worth mentioning about Leicester as well is if you look at Fulham, the goal they scored there, it was a corner taken by Buonanotte, so he's got his first assist of the season as well. He got a few goals for Brighton last season, Buonanotte. He's on loan from Brighton. But it was a corner in. But if you look at the goal, basically, Leicester have a lot of big old players. They've got a lot of tall players in there. Vestergaard's a tall player. Christiansen, Wout Faes, big lad. And Didi, Jamie Vardy, obviously, he's a striker as well. And Oliver Skip, if he plays as well. They've got a lot of players, a lot of physical players there who, on a corner or on a set piece, they can cause a problem for pretty much any defence, because if you're big and tall and strong, it's quite hard to deal with that. And if you look at the goal they scored against Fulham, the corner, they packed the entire back post full of Leicester players. And Buonanotte just sends a ball in there, and I have no earthly idea what Fulham were doing defensively. Because if you look at this, is after the goal is scored, the screenshot of it for those looking online, you've got like a million Fulham players all looking around at each other, playing Scrabble or something, arguing over whether QI key is a word that counts. Whereas the entire Leicester attack is standing around there drinking pina coladas, and one of them just put the pina colada down at the bar, headed the goal in Wout Faes, and then picked his pina colada back up and started supping again. Bizarre. bizarre defending from Fulham on that. But it is worth noting, Leicester showed they can be dangerous from the set pieces, and if they pack the back of the goal, maybe that's a way of getting around zonal marking. Because if a whole bunch of Villa players are stuck at the front post, looking around, playing chess together, maybe it's an area where we lose a concentration. Think, oh, actually, he was supposed to be marking this guy. Steve Cooper's a really canny manager. He did a fantastic job in getting Nottingham Forest into the Premier League after decades, for younger listeners and viewers, decades of Nottingham Forest being away. They're a massive club, Forest. They are a team that you think of who should be in the Premier League, for me at least. And the fact they were away for nearly, it was more than 20 years, was tragic for them, really. But Steve Cooper was the man who delivered them up to the Premier League, and he kept them there. I know they spent wildly and they got a points deduction, so there's question marks about how they actually did it. But it's still a fantastic job what he did to keep them in the league, and he's shown, forget the Gerrard game. He's shown on 2 occasions against Unai Emery when he made it hard for us by packing up the middle of the pitch. In the 2-0 win we had against Nottingham Forest in that run to Europe. And also last season when Nottingham Forest beat us at the City Ground, packed up the middle of the pitch, deep line defence, midfield close to the defence, and we really struggled to break through. And if he does it again this weekend, where he, makes it tight in the middle, maybe he'll throw in a whole new tactic. Maybe he'll catch us by surprise, and maybe a when Buonanotte doesn't start or a Declan Overeem doesn't start, and maybe he throws in an Oliver Skip and there's 3 defensive mids. I don't think I don't think that'll be the best tactic in the world. But if they do that, if they try and just bung up the midfield and have Buonanotte come deep, in here, then Winks and then Didi. And Fatawu comes back, does his defensive duties, Declan Overeem as well, who's a really underrated player, I think, Declan Overeem. I like him. He's a solid defensive player, and he also gets forward very nicely. So if you look at on the screen here, if you look at it, basically for those listening, it's look how tight everything is. The midfield is very close, and all it takes is for Buonanotte to just find a moment, get a ball into Vardy. If he's waiting on the high line, gets him behind, or if Maatsen's forward, Leicester win that ball and Fatawu just gets in there, gets into that space. That's where they can cause, I think, Villa a few problems. And so I think it'll be very, very interesting to see, with Maatsen, he was fantastic when he came on against West Ham. And his ball into Ramsey to create the goal was brilliant stuff. And I thought he did really nicely against Arsenal when he came on as well. There was one occasion where he burst forward and he just looked way more dynamic than Lucas Digne, which is why I suspect he's going to start this weekend. But it'd be interesting to see how Maatsen deals with that. If Leicester are just sitting deep all the time, what can he do? What can he do to create something? What can Villa do here? I talk about the Aston Villa stampede. Ramsey, Rodgers, Onana, Bailey, Watkins, Maatsen, Nedeljkovic as well. These are all players who run and who can, like Mufasa's looking on from the sidelines, getting PTSD from what happened when Scar threw him down in the way of the water buffalo. Getting trampled on, stamped on. The Aston Villa stampede, the Villa stampede. That's what I call it. So when Villa have space, and Rodgers and Ramsey and Maatsen and Duran and all these players have that space to run into, they just overwhelm you, and the opposition defense turn into Mufasa getting trampled on. Right, they're just all over you. If Leicester don't give Villa a lot of space, how do Villa react to that? And it's the first time this season we'll have seen that. I'm intrigued to see what we do and how we deal with it, and whether it leads to question marks about could we have. It's very difficult to find the right player in the transfer window. It really is. Are we a team that maybe has transitional players in abundance, doesn't quite have a player that can just unlock a deep line defence consistently, hence the Joao Felix links? But I think Morgan Rodgers is more than that. I think Morgan Rodgers is more than just a transitional player. Is he at his best when he has space? Maybe. But you've seen as well that Rodgers the other day when he was gliding past Declan Rice and Thomas Partey, making fools of them. Declan Rice currently there staring into the distance, looking at, wondering firstly, why did I get this haircut? And secondly, who the bloody hell was that Morgan Rogers guy? I thought Villa had the pants pulled down by him. He's bloody Zinedine Zidane. He's Diego Maradona. He's absolutely potentially a world class player, Rogers. I really, really believe in him, and I believe he could do it. And I think this could be the game where he shows I don't care about deep line defenses. I'm going to work some space, get a shot in from distance, and there it goes. Or he'll get in for a header. He's a tall guy, or he'll work a pass, link up with Watkins making a run, or Ramsey making a run, McGinn, whoever it is, and show that he's not just a transition back. I genuinely don't believe that's just what he is. I really don't. And show that he's a player who can break through a defense and a deep line midfield or a deep line defense and create whatever he wants. Leon Bailey, I think we're going to be a bit reliant on him to work some magic there against Christiansen. I really think that's an area where Villa can cause a lot of problems out there. If Bailey can get past him once or twice, maybe Nedeljkovic overlaps him and Maatsen sits back. If Nedeljkovic is the one who plays, if he bursts forwards, there was one occasion against Arsenal where he showed what he did against Athletic Club in that pre-season friendly where he burst forward into the final third and gave Athletic Bilbao's defenders nightmares, as he showed at Red Star on multiple occasions. If you watch any highlights videos of him, this guy is a physical dynamo when he bursts on forward down the right. And if he can do that, if he does it against, if Deco Reed has to track him back and Christiansen maybe gets overwhelmed down the right, this could be an area where Villa find a bit of joy. And, then Maatsen has to sit back and wait while Nedeljkovic gets on forward. And maybe that's where we see what Nedeljkovic can do, in that he can beat a man, send a brilliant whip ball in, as you've seen in some highlights videos from Red Star, or he can get into the final third, get into the area, pull a ball back to, a waiting Rodgers or a Watkins getting at the back post ahead of his man or something like that, So I just think there's a lot of things I'm excited to see for Villa. I'm really intrigued. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think Villa are going to do. Let me know how you think Villa might try and break down a really intelligent manager in Steve Cooper, who's going to have a top game plan for Villa, I'm sure of it. Leicester are a resilient team, as they showed against Tottenham. They could have been blown away. They weren't. If Villa can start the game as Tottenham did, the lesson is really do what we did to West Ham, but just score more goals. If we create a bunch of chances as we did against West Ham, take the chances. And if we can dominate in the way that Tottenham did, take the chances as well. It's as simple as that. And as we said, down the left-hand side with the sort of the movement of a Son and a Maddison and Udogie coming up from fullback, if Villa can repeat that trick down the left, then we've seen already this season that is an area where Leicester can be got at. But I just think down the right, they're quite strong. Deco is a good defensive player. Christiansen is a very solid Danish international. But if Villa can just cause havoc down there with Nedeljkovic's overlapping runs or underlapping runs, Leon Bailey with his one-on-one ability, Villa have plenty there to cause trouble. So yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know what players might start, how Villa might approach this, how you think Leicester might approach it. Do you have any concerns yourself, or are you very excited about what Aston Villa can do? I'm very excited. I think Villa have a good run of fixtures now to go and get something, but never underestimate any team in the Premier League, and never underestimate a manager like Steve Cooper, who, knows what the hell he's doing. And he's shown on 2 occasions when he bungs up the centre of the pitch against Villa with Forest on 2 occasions, he makes it hard for us. And we have to be patient, as we were when we beat not Forest 2-0. And we have to be patient and work an opportunity, as we failed to do at the City Ground last season. But I think this Villa team, I think that we're going to this game very, very confident, very annoyed about the Arsenal loss and looking to take it out on Leicester, and really looking forward to seeing what we do. So, yeah. It's also worth mentioning that just after I finished recording this whole thing, Leicester went and sprung a surprise when various transfer reports came out that they had agreed a deal to sign Bilal El Khanous from Genk. He is joining on a 20.5 million euro deal. Just want to quickly talk about that just because El Khanous, if you recall, back in the scouting series I did with Adam Tynan from AVFC London Lions, we talked about players that we hoped Aston Villa would target, and Adam has amazing expertise on players all over the world, really. And last year, the players he tipped ended up all moving on to top clubs. Generally, players that a lot of people haven't heard of, really, within sort of general football fandom. And this year, the first player he tipped that he wanted Aston Villa to target all the way back in June was Luttrell Hertroide, who obviously has been linked with us for about a month after that. He was linked with us and has been linked ever since. But El Khanous was also another player he mentioned that he wanted Aston Villa to take a look at, primarily because he's a highly rated attacking midfield player. He is a Moroccan international, 20 years of age, 4 key passes per 90 minutes. Adam said that his progressive distance his progressive passing distance is superb. He has a high number of shot creating actions. And he's also a dead ball taker. And given the fact that we've lost Douglas Luiz, who was our dead ball taker, that's what Khanous can offer. But also another key thing to note is that his defensive work rate is supposed to be fantastic for a number 10. His high press is very good, and he's more intelligent press, such as the just waiting to pounce on a loose ball is very good as well. And he generally has a high win percentage in the final third. I'm just repeating what Adam said on the show, so that all credit there goes to Adam Tynan. And if you were to look at Khanous and think, all right, well, where might he come into the team? You'd have to think sort of around here where Buonanotte is, the Argentinian who we talked about. And Khanous, could come in and play off of Vardy, perhaps. Maybe he could even play as a false 9 if he had to. But that, given everything that Adam said about him, the various stats you can see about him, the various positive reports about Khanous, yeah, you have to think that's a positive signing for Leicester. Now, I don't know whether he'll be signed in time to play this weekend, but it's definitely worth noting that they have it looks like they've agreed a deal. It's not official yet, to sign a very, very highly rated young player who, if he does play against Aston Villa, it'd be a big debut coming from the Belgian league. Obviously, you take those stats, you think it's in the Belgian league, so that's one thing. Is whether you can repeat that in Serie A, La Liga, Bundesliga, and in this case, the Premier League. It's a different experience. You look at a player like Charles de Ketelaere, somebody who went from being highly rated at Club Brugge. He went over to AC Milan and really, really struggled for a year, but then he eventually went to Atalanta after a year of experience in Serie A, and he had an absolutely fantastic time at Atalanta and won the Europa League with them. So Khanous, it's one of them. Could it be one that he immediately takes to the league and he can transport those kind of underlying stats or those actual stats he has in the Belgian league and take them on into the Premier League? It feels like one of those players that has a lot of raw ability, and it's just the top teams have probably not taken a gamble on him yet, and it's they're waiting for a team like a Leicester, a team that wants to stay in the Premier League, playing at a high standard, and see how El Khanous gets on with a year in the Premier League. I think that's probably where he is right now. And if he plays against Aston Villa, you got to think difficult debut. Obviously, it's going to take a while to adapt to the Premier League, but clearly a very, very dangerous player as well. And also, don't forget Jordan Ayew, former Aston Villa player. He's around. He offers something else as well. So he could be a player Aston Villa have to look out for, but we kind of know all about him, don't we, from all his years at Crystal Palace and his brief time at Aston Villa. So, yeah, thought I'd mention that just before I wrap this up. Stop that share there on YouTube. Please like and subscribe. Please comment. Please let me know what you think. Please comment down below as well. As I say, it's not 100% certain how Villa are building up this season just yet. As I say, I wish I'd been at the Arsenal game to see a few things. But the thing is with the Arsenal game, it's a bit of a special case. There aren't many occasions at Villa Park this season where Villa are going to be a bit more less progressive, a bit more hold out and just wait for the other team to come at us. Um, and so this weekend is the first real occasion in the Premier League where Villa will be the more expected to be the more proactive team and ascendant. I think Leicester will come hard in the first 20. I think they will. I think they'll try and repeat what Forest did, but Villa can absolutely take control of it. We've got the ball possession we've got the ability in possession to do that. And if Villa can not make the same mistake we do against Forest to concede an early goal, then just keep going, and just be careful what Buonanotte can do, and be very careful for Tawu and what he can do if he's given a bit of space. As I say, keep an eye for Tawu, 20 years of age, and Buonanotte just 19. They're both very young, inexperienced, but I think they're really, really talented guys, both of them. And Fatawu is definitely a player to watch this season for Leicester. For any Leicester fans watching, thanks for that. Hope you didn't mind what I just said. Come on, Villa, let's do it. Let's get that 3 points. Good run of fixtures coming up now. Let's go push for that league title. Come on, why not? Why not dare to dream up the mighty Villa?